Good morning, everybody. I'm Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. Joining us at the table this morning, Republican political strategist Garrett Mason and Democratic attorney Ken Altshuler. Good morning to you both.
Good morning and happy St. Patrick's Day to both of you.
Yeah. This week, more calls for gun reform at the State House from the prominent group Moms Demand Action.
And no community should have to experience that kind of fear and trauma. We know what it takes to keep our communities safe. And we're demanding lawmakers act with courage to pass life-saving laws now.
Members of Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action spoke out to demand lawmakers pass a number of bills, including tighter background checks and a waiting period for gun purchases. But Republicans say they still want the focus to be more on mental health. Garrett, let's start with you. We have talked about guns versus mental health in the wake of the Lewiston shooting a lot. Will this kind of national influence have any influence on Republicans?
It hasn't in the past. I think, and I think one of the things that you just said is, guns versus mental health. I don't think it should be that. I think it should be both of the conversations at the same time because, both sides are going to have a very different opinion on where the root is. And I think as far as national conversation goes, a lot of these national organizations come in and talk about these issues, and sure, they carry some weight. But, Mainers have rejected some of those in the past. Michael Bloomberg came in a few years ago, tried to make some changes that didn't work. So I'm sure, whenever you sit a mom in front of somebody, I'm sure people will take a second glance.
Ken?
I said this many times, when 24 children get slaughtered in Sandy Hook and nothing happens, I don't think people coming to Maine and arguing today is going to change anything. The mental health issue is a deflection. It's a way for people to say, let's not change laws because it's all about mental health. It's not about mental health. There are many people who are perfectly mentally healthy who kill people. Domestic violence. If a husband kills a wife, is that mental illness? Most of the time it's just anger. So we've got to get away from focusing on one issue. Mental health is important. But the simple laws we can do to make it harder to get a gun. It's easier to get a gun than to drive a car. There's a problem with that.
We keep having these same discussions week after week after week since Lewiston. What is different and what will it actually take for Democrats to maybe find common ground with Republicans and maybe for Republicans to meet in the middle? Or is this all just for naught and it's all going to be nothing?
Well, I think one of the things that Republicans did right away was they talked about how some of the proposals that the governor put forward in her State of the State were something that they were willing to talk about. So that's what this is all about right now, is having a conversation. And I completely disagree with Ken on the mental health issue. That's a fair point. When something happens in a domestic violence situation, is that a mental health issue? Well, some would argue that it is. But with the larger point of that is that there is a mental health crisis in this country. We talk about it all the time outside of this issue. And, you look at what happened with Mr. Card. You look at the autopsy report. There's a lot to talk about there in his mental health and how we got there. And it was through some of the actions in the military. So I think it does have to be a holistic conversation. It can't just be about making sure that we ban guns from law-abiding citizens.
Experts say that 50% of the population will have some mental problem in their lifetime. And 50% of the population do not commit mass murders. So it's an issue, but it's not the major issue. The real issue is our mental health that says that owning guns is more important than protecting the lives of our citizens. Who made the Second Amendment the most important thing in our laws? It's not the Declaration of Independence says pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Life is number one, not gun ownership. And we got to get away from that thinking. Second Amendment is not the most important law we have on the books.
But it is an important one.
All right, we're going to leave it there. A former special counsel is defending his investigation into President Biden's handling of classified documents. Robert Hur took questions from members of Congress this week. Hur ultimately chose not to charge the president, characterizing him as, quote, an elderly man with a poor memory. The special counsel says his report was fair. Ken, the White House maintains President Biden is innocent. Will this old man speak hurt his reelection?
Sure, because that's the one argument against Joe Biden that people can that resonates with people. He's a doddering old man. He looks frail, he looks weak, and that's important to people. People want their president to look strong. Ronald Reagan's a great example. He was elderly, but he looked strong, he looked powerful. Donald Trump's only 4 years younger than Joe Biden, but he looks healthier, even though he's overweight. So yes, appearances matter. And I think his State of the Union speech helped him somewhat. But out on the campaign trail, he slips on the stairs one time, the whole argument comes back.
Yeah, and former President Trump is also dealing with his classified documents case. A judge in Florida this week denying his request to throw out the case. Trump lawyers argue the law prosecutors used was too vague. The judge has yet to rule on the presidential authority part of this argument. But Garrett, this is one of several legal issues he's facing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in regards to, just if I can comment on what Ken said really quick, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, when you have a special counsel standing up there and saying, we did not exonerate him, we chose not to prosecute him, because of the frailties of his age, and we don't think a jury would be able to take it out on fairly. That is a huge deal. In regards to President Trump, to answer that question, I mean, there's law cases, there's lawfare happening all over this country in regards to President Trump. Now, I would tend to agree that the argument they're trying to use, that the president basically has immunity over all affairs in his entire time in office, that's pretty broad. But this is going to play out throughout the entire course of the election season. But I think for Republicans, the good news is that every time it does, the president's poll numbers goes up.
And I don't think any legal action will happen before the election, to be honest. The New York case is going to be kicked down the road, and I think that was going to be the first one. And so I think we have the election without any prosecution. So I think that's going to be a non-issue at the end of the day.
Yeah, and for both candidates, we'll see if voters really care about the classified documents issue, just generally.
Yeah.
All right. They say young people don't pay attention to politics anymore, but even the least politically engaged are paying attention to this one. Calls to ban TikTok. Legislation passed overwhelmingly in the House this week that would require the social media app's parent company to sell the app within 6 months. There was quite the moment on the floor with Nancy Pelosi. Take a listen.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner. A winner.
Wow, Garrett, even the president has said he'd sign this bill. But the age question comes into play here again. Is this fight even worth it for Democrats?
Before I get to that, I don't agree with Nancy Pelosi many times, but that was a pretty fantastic argument right there. Yeah, that was good. There is probably an age element to it, but listen, I am not really in favor of the government trying to censor entire platforms. I think that there is some huge concerns here. I think there are valid concerns on both sides. When it comes to TikTok, there has been actual verified evidence that it can be a dangerous app to have on your phone. But I think what we really have to pay attention to is that in this legislation, if you read it correctly, you could ban X. You could ban some forms of Instagram, Reels specifically. There's some real problems with the bill, and I'm very hesitant to say that it's a good thing.
Jen.
I mentioned that the Second Amendment was not the most important one. How about the First Amendment, freedom of speech? I'm against this. I don't like censorship. We need to learn to exercise control over what influences us, use our brains. And if we can't tell the difference between propaganda and reality, that's on us, not TikTok. I'm against it. I don't like censorship. I like freedom of speech. I rely on our intelligence to see the difference. I'm against this completely.
The fear is what those other countries, foreign countries, if they'll have influence over younger people, though, right?
Well,
is that a valid concern?
So
I don't know.
Let's teach our younger people to use their independent brains to tell the difference. That's the problem. It's not on them. It's on us.
Well, and I think that's a larger conversation about interference in elections. Every country, major country in the world, interferes in elections. We interfered in Israeli elections. The Russians have interfered in our elections. China has interfered in Russia's elections. So it's not something you're ever going to escape from. You have to use your brain. I agree.
We agree.
So, all right. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. The Weekend Morning Report is back right after this. Good morning, everybody. I'm Zach Blanchard, and this is Political Brew. Joining us at the table once again, Republican political strategist Garrett Mason and Democratic attorney Ken Altshuler. Good morning to you both. Thanks for staying with us.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to start with this. Maine Attorney General Aaron Frey is hitting back against threats made by attorneys general in other states. This week, more than a dozen AGs around the country pledged to fight a proposed piece of legislation that would protect access to abortion and gender-affirming care. While the group of AGs argue it violates their rights, AG Frey says that he is confident if passed, the bill would be able to withstand any legal action. I want to be clear here, this is a bill to protect health care providers. Ken, was Frey right to push back?
Absolutely. Shelter laws are passed in at least 20 states. It has not been challenged judicially yet. I think they will sustain scrutiny. We have to give full faith and credit to other states, but we're saying we're protecting our people here. And if your people come to our state, we're protecting them because they're in our state and we're protecting our health providers. So it will sustain scrutiny. I think he should push back. I understand the threat, but those are all states that have very restrictive abortion laws. And Maine has chosen to be a haven for those people who want to protect their reproductive rights. So we have the right to do that.
Garrett?
Yeah, I honestly, regardless of the subject matter of the bill that they're talking about, I thought it was an interesting move for attorneys general of other states to come in and sound off on this. I thought that was it was unexpected. I don't know that I've ever seen it before, to be honest, in a legislative in regards to a bill. So I thought it was out there, but their reasoning I understand. You know, they have a very different set of philosophies in those states that they're saying, you know, we do not want to aid and abet any kind of behavior like this. As far as Maine goes, I disagree. I have huge issues with the bill, but you know, in regards to just defending the state, I think the Attorney General was right to say, like, this is our position here. In regards to the bill, I have huge issues with it. I think there's some parental rights concerns that need to be addressed, but a unique thing that happened with those attorneys general.
All right, now to the 2024 presidential race. A Trump-Biden rematch is a given now that both candidates have the delegates to secure their party's nominations. Both candidates have been hitting the campaign trail. President Biden was in New Hampshire earlier in the week, rallying some supporters outside of Manchester. He really focused in on the economy, promising to try to lower costs for families, including on a big thing, prescription drugs. He also went after Trump for suggesting cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Take a listen.
If anyone tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise retirement age again, I will stop them. Working people built this country. They pay more into Social Security than millionaires and billionaires do. It's not fair.
In the room for that event, largely with local elected officials. There honestly wasn't a lot of enthusiasm because it was a smaller group. But does this message resonate with everyday voters?
I think it does, but I think what the president is saying is completely false. You know, Joe Biden, when he was senator and even during the time that he was vice president, he voted to cut Social Security and Medicare benefits many times. You know, there's budgets that come up and that happens, and you know, so the fact that he's trying to say that President Trump did that or is going to do that, it's one of the red herrings that Democrats tend to throw out there all the time.
In public forums, Trump has suggested it.
And you know, but this is what I'll say about Social Security in general, and I think this is what President Trump is trying to get at, is it needs reform. It's going to run out. The people who are paying into it that are my age and your age right now, it may not be there for us when we get to retirement age. People paid into those benefits, they need to realize them, but there has to be a transition piece for people our age. Has to be.
It's one of those sacrosanct issues that, you know, nobody running for president can suggest cuts. And when you use that word cut, you've got a problem. That's what Donald Trump did. Now, all of Trump's budgets had cuts in Social Security and Medicare. But you're right, so did Joe Biden. And you're right, I think reform would be great, but you can't go there if you want to get elected. Get elected and then do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of other issues at play too. So here in Maine, there's a bill gaining support in the legislature that would give all of the state's 4 electoral college votes to the presidential candidate who wins the national popular vote. If passed, it passed the Senate this week after initial vote in the House last week. Ken, this is obviously part of a national effort to sidestep the Electoral College. The governor hasn't weighed in, but there are a lot of people angry about this, saying it's essentially throwing away the power of the individual voter.
Well, people don't understand the creation of the Electoral College. First of all, when our founding fathers actually thought the House of Representatives would do all the elections because so many people would be running, they'd never have a majority vote. Also, the Electoral College originally had divided their votes like Maine does in proportion to votes. That's changed. Now you can win by 1 vote and get the entire slate in Pennsylvania. That's the problem. If it was proportional, nobody would care. It's that has caused the problem. And so we either go back and make the Electoral College what it should have been, or we do popular vote. I'm good either way, but the way we do it now, I don't agree with it.
Would you support this?
I would, absolutely.
Garrett?
So, you know, Ken is right. If you want to pick a superior system, it's the Maine-Nebraska system. You know, awarding towards congressional delegate, I think it splits, you know, right down the middle. But here's one thing I want to throw out to Republican voters. During this president, we have 8 million undocumented illegal aliens come into this country. In the 2030 census, we're going to count heads. we're not going to count citizens. And when you do that, those electoral votes get awarded to states like California, Massachusetts, New York, Illinois. Those Democrat voters in those states are going to have more electoral votes with people who are not actually citizens and can't vote. So there is an argument to be made that when you add that many people to the country and you give them electoral votes, that is not a good thing for Republicans. So Donald Trump tried to put a citizenship question in the census to find out where those electoral votes were going in the next census. So I think there's some arguments that Republicans need to look at again and say, are these realistic for what we're dealing with right now? So I think I don't know where this is going to go in the House or the Senate. Governor hasn't weighed in on it. Right. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing.
All right, let's wrap things up with winners, losers. Ken, we'll start with you.
So my winners of the week will be the Irish immigrants that made America so great. I
stole mine. Yeah.
The losers, unfortunately, are the American public who continue to die from guns while we talk about solutions and we talk about mental health issues. What about the mental health of people who have suffered and have their friends killed and their children killed? So those are the losers of the week. I'm sorry I stole your words.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll elaborate on it a little bit.
Okay.
But this country has had Irish immigrants that have made a huge difference in our country. I can tell you this: the Maine potato came from Ireland, so we're awfully very proud of that.
Well done.
So I'll
See
pick
how we work together?
I'll pick my winner as the Maine potato.
Can't the country work together like Garrett and I do?
I know.
That's right.
For the county, too.
That's right. And you know what? My loser this week is political analyst. We are seeing a rematch of Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and kind of a little boring. But we've been doing this for a couple of years now, so. But yeah.
This will be the last time we have old white man, I hope, running for president. I'm hoping.
Well, I don't know.
Garrett, Ken, thanks so much. That's going to do it for this week's Political Brew. Don't forget, if you missed the first half, you can watch anytime on our News Center Maine website or streaming on News Center Maine Plus. The Morning Report is back right after this.